Sure, production may be shut down for the Batman movie, like so many others right now, but there are a lot of reasons to be excited about this movie, and I'm going to tell you everything that we know about this movie right now. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. Now, normally on this channel, we talk about shows that we grew up on in the 1890s, in the 1980s and 90s. And we're working our way through a series talking about Batman Beyond. And we just finished up season 1, and I thought it'd be an appropriate time to take a little bit of a break and talk about something else that we're big fans of here on the channel, and that is Batman and Batman movies.
I'm Batman.
So if you're here to see me continue reviewing season 2 of Batman Beyond, don't worry, I'll be jumping into those next week. But in the meantime, thought I'd do something a little bit different here. But if you're new here, I hope that you'll hop below and hit the subscribe button because we got a lot of great content here. But today, we're talking about Matt Reeves' The Batman. I know this production has been pretty tight under wraps as it should be to keep the intrigue and surprise alive. But there's a couple of things that they talked about, that they've released information about with this movie, that gets me particularly excited. And I'll explain that as we go through the video. But I think first and foremost is that, yes, they did start production on this. And Matt Reeves said in an interview recently that he was about a quarter of the way through production by the time they had to shut down due to the coronavirus, COVID-19 that's going on right now. And the other piece of information that I find very reassuring in that, during this kind of pause in the middle of production, he does not have any plans to rewrite the script or make any major changes to that. He may readjust some of the tone or tweak little things or plan ahead on some of the things that they could do differently coming up, but no major changes, which I think is, for me, was very refreshing, knowing some of the challenges, I'll say, that we've seen out of Warner Brothers and DC in shifting directions in the middle of the production, like Justice League.
Tell me, do you bleed?
Please keep in mind, studios are a business like anything else. The movie industry is show business. And so the executives in charge of making a lot of these decisions are looking at the bottom line. They're looking at the dollars. They're looking at ways of making the most money. And sometimes that is at the sacrifice of some of the artistic decisions that may be wise. But they're looking at numbers and graphs and projections and marketing and PR and all of these other areas that we as fans of some of this material don't care as much about because we just want to see that movie that we want to see. And there's just a lot of other factors to enter into that. But having said all that, sometimes the decisions that are made are based on what they think is going to be best for making the most money, and sometimes that doesn't come to fruition, like Justice League.
Save one.
But I do think that some of the choices that they've been making recently, some of the shift in their vision for DC and Warner Brothers movies has been in the right scope. I think that some of the mistakes that were made with Justice League, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but some of the mistakes that were made with Justice League were them trying really hard to catch up to Marvel and capitalize on some of that massive world building thing that Marvel did. But that wasn't something that Marvel stumbled upon. They built that for 10 years before it came to the Infinity War level that it was by the time DC wanted to get on that bandwagon. But all that to say that the shift that Warner Brothers has taken is more in the direction of the success of Wonder Woman movie and Aquaman, of doing isolated stories with isolated characters and not focus so much on trying to get them all together into a Justice League movie. Maybe that'll come again in the future. We'll see. And then they took it even a step further with the Todd Phillips Joker movie by telling an isolated story that is not linked to the other movies. And I feel like, based on everything that I've read so far about The Batman, is that's more the direction of the Batman movie. First of all, Matt Reeves has made it very clear that he had a very strong vision for Batman, just like he did with Planet of the Apes. And he went in and pitched that to Warner Brothers and was very clear about, this is the movie that I want to make, that I'm excited about making. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But this is the only reason I'd be interested. And he was surprised and I'm sure excited when they said, yes, let's do that movie. And I feel like that's a good shift that they're taking, is putting the trust in the right person to make the right movie that they want to make, rather than trying to force feed what they think of from a corporate level of what the movie should be, and forcing the directors and the team to kind of conform to that to sell tickets or to sell action figures or to sell, merchandise or whatever the reasoning being. And just trusting that if they have the right person with the right vision making a movie, that all the rest of it will fall into place. And Hollywood's like anything else. I mean, they're investing millions of dollars into, and more than that, in some of these franchises, some of these larger tentpole movies. They need to have proof. They want to know that it's going to work, that it's going to come to fruition, and it's not just taking a chance. We're not talking about investing a couple $100 into something, and if it doesn't work out, oh, big deal. They're putting a lot of money into this and a lot of trust, and especially in Warner Brothers' case, where DC is one of their flagship products, that we got to know it's going to work.
Well, no one's laughing now.
You can say that again, pal.
So here's what we know so far. The title, The Batman. Vengeance being kind of the subtitle to that, which may just be a working title, as they often do with some of these productions, just to kind of keep it more secretive. That may not be the final title, but I think that even in the title, that tells a lot about where the direction is going with this. In the early days of the comic book, some of the classic Silver Age, Golden Age comics of Batman, he was known as the Batman. In more recent periods of time, in 70s and 80s and that, the Batman title had kind of fallen away and just became Batman. So I think the fact that they're kind of returning to those roots shows a take on the character being more rooted in the older version of Batman than the new updated version, and indicates a lot of the information that's been coming out too, that it's going to be an early story of Batman, the Batman. But that in itself gets me pretty excited, because I think a lot of the direction that they've been going with some of these superhero movies is that kind of real world, updated, high-tech version of Batman and other superheroes, which I do enjoy, but there's some of the core values and core elements of Batman that I'm looking forward to, that it sounds like they're going to be approaching that in this movie.
They represent American youth who love their country and are glad to fight for it.
We also know that the movie was originally slated to be released on June 25th, 2021 as a summer release, but now due to the shutdown, they have pushed that back to October 1st of 2021. Not a huge difference, but they are moving out of the summer season, which again is not anything unusual for what other movies are having to do. And I know that time slots are very precious, and trying to find the right slot to compete or not compete with the right movies during that same period of time, and kind of spreading, again, their projection of their numbers all kind of filtering in through that. So as of right now, it's not a huge difference in how much additional time we have to wait until the movie comes out. But that's, again, all as of right now, that if they don't get back on set and continue production when they think they will, or that's pushed out even further, of course, the movie release date will then go out even further. You can't release a movie you haven't finished shooting. I think that's how that works.
It's the Joker.
In addition to that, of course, if you haven't heard already, that Robert Pattinson has been cast as Batman, obviously skewing more to a younger Batman than what they had with Ben Affleck as an older Batman. So that in itself tells kind of a different story around Batman. And we've also gotten other casting news. We know Colin Farrell has been cast as the Penguin, which was previously thought to be Jonah Hill, but now is going to be Colin Farrell. We have Paul Dano as the Riddler, Zoe Kravitz as the Catwoman. And just in that, right there, we've got 3 villains that are big name actors that are going to be featured in this movie, which makes me think that they're all going to share a pretty good percentage of screen time in this. And going to need to be a story that supports all of them. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But then we also, rounding out the cast, we have Andy Serkis as Alfred, we have Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, and Peter Sarsgaard as a new character, the DA, Gil Colson. So just looking at that lineup of the cast, I'm sure more information will be surfacing soon about that. It, to me, felt very obvious that they're focused on the acting quality, the quality of the characters. These are all top-notch, top-level actors, not necessarily traditional superhero type actors, but just high caliber, high quality actors. I mean, go right down the list of these characters, even in supporting roles, are all top-notch, which I think puts a bigger focus on the characters and the story rather than the spectacle, which also lines up with some of the things that Matt Reeves has been saying about the story that he wanted to tell. And this not being so much about bang, bang, shoot 'em up kind of superhero movie, which if you've seen my reviews in the past on some of the episodes, it's my same feeling, is that the story has got to carry the weight of this versus just a spectacle action, which again, shifting the movie out of the summer blockbuster season into the fall season, that's the shift in the calendar. If you look at the movies that come out over the summer, they're the big popcorn blockbuster kind of movies. And then as you get into later in the year, they're more movies gearing more towards the Oscar season and heavier stories and dramatic films and acting and all those kind of things that they want to showcase later in the year. So I think that may be some of the tone shift that's going to be going on right now as they're being forced to move the movie, is that it's got to kind of fit in that realm of movie releases versus just a action, big explosion kind of movie.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
And I'm excited about this lineup. You know, I'm a big fan of the Riddler, and as much of a fan of the Jim Carrey version of the Riddler and the Frank Gorshin and the John Astin Riddler, it's a very different take than some of the things that I enjoy about the Riddler. That's probably the casting news that I was most excited about, is Paul Dano to play the Riddler. He's a very unique actor, and he's somebody that I wouldn't have initially thought of as, oh, that's who should play the Riddler. But then once they announced it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm really excited to see what he does and brings to that character. And I'm hoping that, you know, the Riddler, who has typically been a villain that's not been taken very seriously in a lot of the iterations, that I'm hoping that Paul Dano will bring to that character, and with Matt Reeves' direction, to bring some real weight to that character that we haven't seen in the past, which is something that I'm really excited about seeing. Now we've also seen some set photos and videos that have popped up, some official from Matt Reeves, a little teaser that I released of Robert Pattinson in the Batman costume, and also some not so official cell phone kind of shaky behind the scenes videos. And there's not a lot that we can pull from that. The Batsuit in general, I was a little surprised at, based on what I was hearing about the story of Batman being a younger Batman and him getting started, that it feels like a very finished kind of suit. And also it feels like the design is very similar to what we've seen in like the Christopher Nolan Batman, that very armored kind of look to the suit. I'm not saying that I wanted to see more of a spandex gray and blue outfit, but I really like the direction that they went. Some of the redeeming qualities of the Justice League movie and Batman versus Superman is Ben Affleck's costume, that bulky, kind of more fitted, streamlined outfit. I felt was more true to the comic books and what we're used to seeing in there. But I know there's this push of just making it very real world, which feels more in line with what we're seeing there. But it does have collars, which is neat. So it's possible that is kind of the later outfit that we see later on in the movie. And maybe there's an earlier version that he's wearing that they didn't want to release yet, to make fans that don't agree with me a little nervous that, oh, he's just wearing spandex. But I think the Batmobile that they showed, that they released of, looks more in line with what I'm talking about. That it looks like a real car, kind of a souped up muscle car sort of thing, which again goes back to that kind of golden Silver Age era of the comic books, in that he drives kind of just a sort of a regular car that suits his needs rather than a tank or some concept car sort of vehicle.
Does it come in black?
Now, as far as the plot is concerned, or what the movie is going to be about, not a lot is known about it. Some of the early information that I was reading about was that Matt Reeves was focused on telling more of a noir detective story. And oh my gosh, that was the first thing that really got me excited about this. Again, if you've seen my reviews on here in the past, you know that that's the things that I loved about Batman the Animated Series, was the detective-driven noir sort of episodes, which I don't think has been focused on in the movies. Batman is considered the world's greatest detective, and yet there's so many times in the movies where he's just resorted to punching and doing a couple of little detective sort of works, but we kind of glaze over that. I mean, in the 89 Batman movie, when he figured out what the chemicals were that the Joker used, he just sort of recapped what he figured out, but we didn't see him really doing the detective work in that. Same thing in Batman Forever, is that Batman and Alfred just kind of going back and forth, and they quickly solve these riddles off the top of their head as if it's just common knowledge, and we don't get to see the detective work. That's exciting to me. I would love to see a true noir detective film out of Batman, and I, for one, would be first in line to buy tickets to that.
Back in New York, I handled 31 suicide cases, personally.
Now, Kevin Smith has come out and said that he happens to know that the movie is going to be based on The Long Halloween, a comic book series back in the 90s, which was more of a detective mystery sort of storyline. And so if they're basing it on that, that sort of lines up with what we've seen so far. I mean, the Riddler was a major player in that, and Catwoman. Carmine Falcone was also a big player in that story, but a piece of casting information that we haven't heard that almost feels like it would be needed in that is Harvey Dent. We see a version of how Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face in The Long Halloween, unless they're shifting that character or they're keeping that under wraps, and it will be Peter Sarsgaard's DA character that becomes Two-Face and Harvey Dent, and they're kind of retelling that story. I don't know, to be determined, or maybe they're taking out that element and just having a DA serve that kind of portion in the story. And as great of a story as The Long Halloween is, that's one of the most popular story arcs in Batman comic books. And I think a lot of people would be disappointed if they just went to the theater and saw a live action version of that. So I'm hoping that there's some influences from that and some elements pulled from that story, but it is an original story and kind of a inspired by The Long Halloween versus just a retelling of that story. But certainly a lot of the elements that made that movie or that story, that comic book series so great, would play well in a noir detective, trying to find out who this new murderer is in Gotham. All those kind of elements would be really cool to see, and plays into what Matt Reeves has said about his version of Batman, which is seeing the struggle and the weight and the burden that Batman carries early on in his career, of knowing that he should be doing this or trying to do what's right, but having to carry that burden. That could be a very compelling, very strong story to tell.
Maybe it's time for Batman to return to the night that spawned him.
Now, even though this is kind of Batman in the early years, a younger Batman, Matt Reeves has said that he doesn't plan on telling a origin story. Phew, that makes me very happy. We all know the origin of Batman, but he does say that he wants to honor that origin, or use the origin and how it influences where Batman is currently. So we haven't heard any casting news about a younger Batman or a boy Bruce Wayne. I'm sure that we won't be able to get by without seeing that iconic death scene of Batman's parents, either in flashbacks or as a prologue to the movie. Somewhere they'll fit it in. But I do think that it is important, if you're going to tell a story about the burden that Batman carries to right the wrongs in the world, you kind of got to tell a little bit, or at least show how he's dealing with what caused him to go in that direction. You can't very well glaze over that without hinting to it at the very least. So I'm sure there'll be some flashbacks, or even just in the dialogue with Alfred or something, they'll allude to his past through there. I'm okay with that, but as long as we don't start the movie as him as a boy and see his parents get killed and then him growing up and then him going, that's been a big trend lately where they feel this need to tell the origin. And we've seen it. Batman Begins did a great job of that, telling kind of that full story of Batman growing up. And if you don't know where Batman came from by now, you're probably not the target audience to go see the movie. I urge you, don't tell the origin again. We've seen the origin of Spider-Man so many times in the movies. We don't need to keep doing that with Batman as well.
Oh, yeah, I was cleaning the chimney.
And I did hear also that the movie's going to take place in the 90s. Although I personally would love to see a noir Batman movie set in the 40s or 50s. Maybe doing a period piece of that extent is a little reaching for my own interests. But it does kind of excite me to see this movie take place not in current day, but having a time frame, because it kind of limits some of the technology that we can use and not use in a movie like that. A lot of the newer superhero movies are kind of timeless or kind of take place current day. Just putting a time period on it, if that is in fact true, is kind of exciting. I think it'd be kind of neat to see it set in a time period.
Make something else. Something better.
I think we've got the right person in charge in Matt Reeves, and I think that he's got a clear vision. As long as Warner Brothers and DC let him go off on that track and trust his instincts in to make this movie what it should be. And I think telling a story, a detective noir story, is something we haven't seen, and it would be exciting to see on the big screen. So I think if things go the direction that they're going and there is no last minute changes in the direction of this, that I think we're in good hands. I think that taking the source material of The Long Halloween, Matt Reeves, who's proven himself as a very competent and qualified filmmaker, that the Planet of the Apes movies were fantastic and a great revisiting of a classic franchise. Same thing with this, and I think that his passion for Batman and his passion for great storytelling and quality filmmaking in the ensemble of actors that have been hired for this, I'm excited. Again, I'm most excited about the detective noir element, just given my personal interests in Batman. But overall, I'm feeling good about this movie, and I'm excited to see what information is going to come out in the future. And I'm not one to really dig into all the set photos and dissecting every little element of this, because I like going into the movie surprised and seeing it through fresh eyes and not having an assumption of what I think it's going to be. But I think just getting enough information as we've gotten so far is enough to get me excited, and I hope you are as well. So let me know in the comment section below if you too are excited about this movie, or any other information that you've learned along the way that you want to share with the fellow viewers of this. Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, and also my reviews of classic cartoons that we grew up in the 80s and 90s, then hit the subscribe button. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.